Welcome back. Tonight, both the Florida Republican and Democratic state parties are about to pick new leaders. It's fascinating. If for no other reason, it has become a spectacle of rancor, dirty campaigning, power plays, you name it. At the center of it all, local boys, Sarasota State Committeeman Christian Ziegler, Governor Rick Scott's guy who is running to knock off the incumbent party chair, State Representative Blaise Ingoglia. On the Democratic side, Alan Clendenin, who lives both on Anna Maria Island and in Tampa, but is running as state committeeman from a tiny community near the state prison in Stark. Joining us for more on this power struggle taking place in both state parties is Zach Anderson, political editor for the Herald Tribune, Keith Fitzgerald, professor of political science at New College of Florida and a former state representative, and Adam Smith, political editor for the Tampa Bay Times. Boy, this is pretty crazy, and we're going to get into it in just a moment. But first, Keith, why should anybody who is watching this right now even care?
There's no doubt that it's much more interesting for political junkies than it is for other people. But it is important. The parties are sort of like the coaching staff in a football program or a basketball program. They do the recruiting, they gather up the resources, they make sure everything runs. And so this is the behind-the-scenes team that determines how the Republicans and the Democrats operate as they go into the next election cycle.
You know, coming up in our next block, we're going to talk about, when it comes to the Democrats and Republicans, what both parties individually need, where their strengths and their weaknesses. But Adam, my God, what's going on with the Democratic Party? Just within the last few minutes, Alan Clendenin, who, as we reported, shopped around for a place because he lost his race for state committeeman in Hillsborough County, tried to get in Manatee, then went up to Stark, and now was disqualified by the executive committee?
Yeah, you have multiple candidates county shopping, basically to be able to qualify under these arcane rules that it takes to be eligible to be chairman of the party.
Has this ever been done before?
Yes. They always play games. Usually there's somebody picked by the sort of establishment of the party, and then they have to sort of finagle their way through loopholes to be able to get to some local DEC or executive committee position to qualify. And the question you have to ask, why make it so hard to find good people who can be chairman?
Well, Alan Clendenin, and he has been a guest on the show many times over the last year. He is currently the vice chair of the Florida Democratic Party after losing narrowly to Allison Tant 4 years ago. But obviously he has had a tough time for the last couple of months.
Vice chairman of the state party, you fly too close to the sun, you never know what can happen. His own party knocked him out. I think they thought he was a little too big for his britches, and so therefore he couldn't qualify as a leader in Hillsborough County. And then he apparently went to Manatee County, where he has a property, tried there, didn't work out, so he went up to Bradford County near Florida State Prison and managed to find a slot that he could win to qualify. And really, Dwight Bullard, another one of the candidates from Miami-Dade, is doing the same thing.
But he was not disqualified, and Clendenin was.
Apparently, Clendenin has a few more enemies than Bullard does and is taken more seriously than Bullard.
And Zach, I wanted to get you in here because what is the deal with Christian Ziegler? He is also a frequent guest on this show. He is respected, but he is running a pretty, what's the term when...
Well, he's been accused of running a scorched earth campaign by his opponents, and I'm not sure it's gone that far, but it has, taken on some kind of controversial tactics. There's been some outside media organizations, somebody who worked for Breitbart who's written about this. It just shows that no matter how big your success is, and Republicans are very dominant in Florida right now, you can always find something to argue about, and there's still issues that they have within the party. There's divisions that they have within the party between the Trump wing and the Marco Rubio wing. There's issues that they have between the governor, Rick Scott, who a few years ago did not get his preferred candidate for party chair into office, and then has stopped raising money for the party and has had a break with the party. So there's an idea that Ziegler has tapped into that the party is not operating on all cylinders.
All right, we're going to talk about that some more. We're getting started just on this subject and on the races. The state party chair is coming up along with our check on our forecast, so we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the races for chair of the state Republican and Democratic parties. Our guests tonight are Zach Anderson of the Herald Tribune, Keith Fitzgerald of New College of Florida, and Adam Smith of the Tampa Bay Times. And Zach, I want to start with you because, and we showed a little of this video going after the current Republican Party chair, and it was produced by an organization affiliated with Breitbart. You know, what is Breitbart, which is Steve Bannon, who is now the senior counselor to the president-elect. What is it doing being involved with Florida state Republican politics?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, Breitbart is almost viewed as sort of a wing of Donald Trump's campaign at this point. You know, it was very pro-Trump throughout his campaign. It's considered sort of the bunch of Trump loyalists, and it sort of shows that, I don't know how high up this goes, but certainly people within the Trump administration or who are on the Trump campaign are certainly not happy with the current chair of the Republican Party of Florida. There was an idea among some people that he was not supportive of Trump early on in the campaign and didn't do enough for Trump. The former Florida state director for Trump, Karen Giorno, has said some very scathing things about Angolia. So I think it's viewed that Trump is getting involved in this, at least through some of his surrogates.
Susie Weil, who ran the Trump campaign, is supporting
Yeah, you sort of have a division between some of the Trump people. Susie Weil, though, she's a lobbyist in Tallahassee. She's more tied in with the power structure there, and so Angolia and that is sort of all part of that.
And let's talk for a moment the fact that Rick Scott, the governor, is not involved with the Florida Republican Party has left the party itself in pretty dire straits financially.
The storyline with the Republican Party, I think, is fascinating because, in a way, this election is less about Blaise Angolia, the current chairman, than it is about Florida House Speaker Richard Corcoran. Because Blaise Angolia is in the Florida House, the party is seen as basically operating under the authority of Richard Corcoran. Richard Corcoran, in many ways, is Blaise's boss. Rick Scott doesn't have a good relationship with Richard Corcoran as it is. The party snubbed him, so he's pulling out. The Florida Senate doesn't quite trust Richard Corcoran. They're not putting money in there. The guy who's the front runner to become the next Republican nominee for governor, Adam Putnam, he doesn't raise money for them. He relies on his own committee. So partly what we're seeing is the diminishment of both parties in the era of political committees, et cetera.
But in terms of the Republican Party, they have very little money on hand, but you can't argue with the results. They have dominant majorities in both the Florida House and the Senate. Let's talk for a moment about the Democratic Party. Adam, could you tell us a little bit about Stephen Patel? Because nobody who's watching this would probably really know much about him.
Well, probably they don't know much about any of these people, but Stephen Patel is a very, very wealthy businessman from Miami-Dade. He has been involved in national and statewide politics. If you're a prominent politician, probably if you're Keith Fitzgerald, you know Stephen Patel because he brings in the money. He's key, and I think that is largely his appeal. That's why he is the candidate that Bill Nelson is supporting, which is probably the single most important vote, even though he's not voting, that you have.
Because Bill Nelson is the only statewide elected Democrat. He is the next Democrat that is up for re-election. So I would imagine whatever Bill Nelson wants, he'll get.
Well, he hopes, but this is the Democratic Party, so people don't always march in line.
Keith, you and I have talked a lot about what the state Democratic Party needs, and one thought would be, instead of necessarily a big money man, would be somebody who can develop a message and talk about it, because there is such a vacuum in terms of Democratic leadership in Florida at this point.
Well, it does need a money man, so let's not discount that. Money is important in politics, and the Democrats just are structurally behind in Florida, so that's important. But I do agree that the Democrats just have a tough time not holding any prominent positions in state government. There isn't anyone to carry the message until you have a gubernatorial candidate. I think it's extremely frustrating in the session where a lot of people, if they knew what happened in Tallahassee, wouldn't like it. But there isn't anyone to tell the story about what is going on. One thing that the Democratic Party has a tough time with, and some of it's just a lack of resources to make this happen, is they don't really coordinate message very well. So you'll have, the House Minority Leader says one thing, the House Majority Leader says another. There isn't somebody who comes in and coordinates message for all the people, so the same things are said about the same issues on the same day.
Not only that, our experience is that in many cases, Democratic campaigns are islands onto themselves, that every candidate kind of feels like they're alone out there, as opposed to the Republicans who play politics like a team sport.
Yeah, no, one thing I would say that people need to start wrapping their head around is that the two parties are not exactly mirror images of each other, which is the way we sort of like to think about it. The Republicans have a vast network of resources outside of the formal party structure, with think tanks, connections to various different groups and organizations like evangelicals, so they can push message and come up with policy initiatives in a way that Democrats have a very difficult time doing, because they simply don't have the same kind of support base.
So Adam, if you could put your finger on it in terms of what's happening right now with the state Republican Party, what is the party lacking at this point? I mean, what can a chairman do to kind of change things in terms of allowing the Republican Party to be better financed, if anything, at this stage?
Financing is the least of the problems with the Republican Party, generally speaking. But you do have this situation where when the governor really has disowned the party, and that's what's happened. Christian Ziegler, he may be self-serving, but he's right. They are struggling to raise money because the governor's raising a lot of money and keeping it for his own committee. So it really reflects what's happening in the party as a whole in some ways. Lots of different factions and some mistrust against different groups within the party.
And Zach, you have talked to the new Democratic State Committee woman for Sarasota County and Manatee County. What are they hoping to get out of the Democratic race?
I think they want to be listened to. I think they feel like, the grassroots of the party has been overlooked a little bit. There's been a lot of top-down leadership. They haven't had a lot of say. I mean, I think they would like to be pushing more of a liberal message. I think they also just want to win. They want somebody that can win. So I think that the idea of a Stephen Patel who can raise a lot of money is also very alluring to them.
Because let me bring this up. Our ABC 7 political analyst, Frank Alcock, ran for the state senate this time around. He put together a credible campaign, but he was not helped very much by the state party. I mean, are these the kinds of races that Democrats hope that they could get the party involved with?
They need to be playing in some of these races, like what the one that Frank Alcock ran in. His district is pretty significantly Republican, but it's not overwhelmingly Republican. The Democrats should be playing in some of those seats if they're going to, get back into a majority. Right now, they can't even play in the seats where they have an advantage, where Hillary Clinton won. She won 51 House seats this year, and the Democrats only hold 41 state House seats, so there's 10 seats.
It gets to be a vicious cycle. With the Democrats have no power in Tallahassee, they can't raise money to even help a credible candidate in a potentially competitive district like Frank Alcock.
Okay, let's take a quick break, but when we return, we'll have final thoughts from our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about a bill to make motorcycle helmets mandatory. Welcome back. Tomorrow, Florida Republicans and Democrats will pick their new chairs, but how will that leadership affect the futures of both parties? Our guests join us now for final thoughts. Adam, just look at the Democratic race. Will it make a difference?
Really, I think what matters most in both these races, whether the next chair is somebody that screws everything up. That's what really matters. So far, it has not ultimately made much of a difference who the chairperson is, as long as they're competent.
Well, I mean, how could things kind of possibly get worse for the Democrats, Keith?
Well, I'm sort of defensive about the Florida Democratic Party as such, the formal organization. I don't think it's their personnel. I think it's their inability to get the kind of resources you need to compete with the other side. So I think a fundraiser would probably be a good idea for the Democrats.
And Zach, when it comes to the Republican Party, is the Ziegler insurgent campaign something that could actually make these divides even worse?
I don't think so. I think the Republicans are pretty dominant, and whatever happens, I think that they'll continue to be dominant in the near future. I think the stakes are a lot higher for the Democrats. They really need somebody to pull them out of irrelevancy, somebody who can get them organized, get out the vote effort stronger, raise some more money. So I think that you know, they're at rock bottoms. Whoever they pick is probably not going to make it any worse, but they need to definitely improve.
With our few seconds left, you know, Christian, as we said, is on the show very often. Does anybody believe he has a good shot to actually knock off the party chair? Adam?
He has a shot, not a good shot.
I don't think so, but you know, I'm sort of not big in the prediction business these days after the presidential campaign.
Exactly.
As his hometown reporter, I'll say that he definitely has a chance, and we'll see what happens. I mean, it does seem like there is some discontent there, and you know, you never know. The current chairman pulled a big upset, so who knows what can happen.
All right. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic. Currently, motorcycle riders in Florida are not required to wear a helmet if they are 21 or older and have proper insurance. Now, one Republican member in the State House is filing a bill to make it mandatory for all bikers, and we asked you what you thought about the legislation. Martin Hafer writes, I think they should be able to drive without helmets or jackets, but I also think health insurance companies should not need to pay for their injuries unless they have helmets on when the accident occurs. Kit Klug writes, only people that actually ride a bike should be commenting, as the rest of you are playing without talking on your phones while you drive. I see you every day. You have absolutely no right to tell others how to be safe. But Mark Jones writes, yes to helmets, not because riders are dangerous, but car drivers are. Chances are you will die or be seriously injured for months. Personally, I wouldn't take the chance. I am wearing a helmet. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, want to watch past Roundtable discussions? They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to our guests for being here tonight. Zach Anderson is political editor of the Sarasota Herald Tribune. Keith Fitzgerald is a professor of political science at New College of Florida. And Adam Smith is political editor of the Tampa Bay Times.